Hello and welcome to another episode of myNewsWrap, news from the SAP and the Microsoft world. Today, this is the last session in 2020, so I will make a little break over the holidays and we will start again in January. So enjoy this last session of the year, episode 16. And let's start with the news. So last week was TechEd. Last session of myNewsWrap was only about TechEd. Today we will switch back to the usual format. And nevertheless, we will start with some, let's say, aftermath of TechEd. There have been two great blog posts by Tobias Hoffmann that I referenced quite often in this format because of the high quality content, I guess. First one is his point of view about the SAP TechEd, especially the keynotes, the announcements or the missing announcements of the TechEd, which is given in this first blog post about No Milk Today, where he kind of digs into the topics and digs into the keynote and gives his point of view and also compares that with, let's say, other events. So absolutely worth reading from my perspective. And he also brought out a second blog post. And I think currently he's quite sticking to music, I guess. Because here we have We Don't Need No Education, another song title. And here he's digging more deeply into the topic that was stressed during SAP TechEd, which was getting free access or limited free access from a temporal perspective to the SAP Learning Hub. I think here is written it's ending in March 2021. And here he kind of discusses the topic from an overall perspective, especially when comparing to the offering of other vendors like Microsoft, like AWS, what they do, what they offer. And he also has some conclusion in the end. Let's see if I find it quite quickly. So of course there is a lot of homework to do for SAP because it's not their usual way to offer education for free, except for OpenSAP. So that's already a great move, but that's kind of only one piece of the puzzle. And here we have one very clear statement that, well, basically it's only super easy to learn, get sample demos, scenarios, and so on, is the UR5 area. So that's quite a topic. And he also announces something, or I read that as an announcement, that is maybe a conference that will come up 2021 that's purely focusing on ABAP. So maybe something to look forward to in 2021. Okay, then one further news from the SAP, let's say, general topic area. There is another change in the, let's say, C-level area. SAP hires a new chief design officer. And this new chief design officer is Benedict Leonard. And he's coming from Microsoft. So another person who's changing from Microsoft to SAP. Obviously, he was quite busy in the area of user experience at Microsoft, no surprise, with Fluent Design and so on and so forth. So let's see what changes will come when he takes over with respect to user experience. Now let's go to the SAP Cloud Platform topics. There have been two findings from my perspective. One blog post, which is, I think, really useful if you start with SAP Cloud Platform and you start to set up your enterprise account and you start to do the onboarding. This blog post really gives you a first clear step-by-step guide that is also available in the Discovery Center, which also highlights, well, you get an email, and this email is received by the IT contact that was handed over to SAP, which is something that's not so intuitive, and so on and so forth. So it really goes through the different steps. It also highlights the respective components if you have issues, if you need support, and so on. So this, I think, if you start in a company, in an enterprise with SAP Cloud Platform, onboarding with the setting up of the account, take a look at this blog post. And then there was another, well, small goodie from my perspective, that's now coming with the Cloud Platform CLI, which now supports JSON output. So this, I think, helps quite a bit when you are doing your administration via CLI, because now you have a format that can be used, that can be further processed in a decent manner, or let's say in a standard manner. Not big improvement, but I think all the steps are going in the right direction that SAP is doing there in order to make the SAP Cloud Platform a more professional platform to handle. Then I have some news about the cloud application programming model. First of all, that's already a bit ago, so it was on 7th of December, so during TechEd, there was a new release of SAP CAP, with some goodies in there, for example, with the integration of Jupyter notebooks in order to play around. There are some updates on the CAP samples. So a nice early Christmas present for all the CAP users out there. Then there are 2 blog posts concerning or using CAP. The first one is about developing a multi-experience app with the MDK and CAP. Now, for those of you who ask themselves, like me, what is a multi-experience app? I still have no idea, but from my perspective, it's a rebranding of the mobile development kit. So I don't see if there is any real improvement, but if you're doing MDK development and you're using, or you want to use CAP, this blog post gives you some first impression how to do it, with quite some extensive description on how to model your data, on how to deploy it. So that's useful, and then how to bind it into the MDK. There is one comment that I want to highlight on this blog post that is right there. Because there is one topic that's by intention left out of the blog post, and that's all about authentication. So yeah, it's, I think, one thing that we all stumble across when we want to do applications, and now, well, the answer is authentication topic is non-trivial. Yeah, that's right, but it would be quite helpful if you have such a blog, or if there would be a second part of that blog that then highlights the way of authentication. The same is true for the second blog that I want to highlight by Kevin MIsc, who was also part of the developer keynote, I think. And he describes on deploying a CAP application to Kyma and connecting it to an iOS app. I think the most important thing is that the iOS app does not support the OData v4 services that are generated from CAP. So you need to use v2 adapter proxy in order to make it accessible from the iOS app. That's, I think, useful news. What's, yeah, kind of a little bit, well, how should I say it, not so cool. It's a CAP application that's using SQLite as storage. So it's just a basic CAP application that's Dockerized. So you put it in a Docker container, you deploy it to Kyma. It's kind of all self-contained because the SQLite is running inside. So yeah, that's not really somewhere near production ready. So I would at least hope that there is some usage of HANA Cloud Services in order to do the persistency. Well, and there's the description of the iOS topic. I think down below there are the constraints or something like that. I'm not quite sure. There is also something that there is no authentication as in the previous block. So also one harder topic left out when you're working with CAP, when you're working on Kyma, and when you want to do real life workloads. So not really fully comprehensive, but at least a starting point. Then let's switch to the Kyma area. There was one great news, which is hidden within this block. So Kyma was updated on SAP Cloud Platform to release 1.17. This also is true for the trial landscape. So you also have this on trial. And one part that came along with 1.17 is, let's say, an extended monitoring on Kyma that was already available when you, let's say, ran it locally or deployed Kyma open source to Azure. But this is now also available in the managed offering. And this allows you deeper insights into the logs and into the metrics. For those of you who have kind of taken a quick look at Kyma, before 1.17, there was just the logs area, and this was really just displaying the logs that came out within the Kyma dashboard. Now, both for logs and for metrics, you jump up, you jump off to Grafana dashboards that you can use in order to get your insights. There is one point that is worth to note, and that's mentioned in the very first paragraph of the blog post. At the moment, the managed Kyma runtime only offers a read-only access to Grafana, so you cannot define or save your custom dashboards if you want to have some custom metrics of your application. However, there are a lot of predefined workbooks, metrics and so on in there within the default cache dashboard. So at least for playing around, for looking what's possible, for looking what's already there, I think that's really worth to reserve some time on to investigate from my perspective. And I'm quite sure this limitation will be gone sooner or later so that you can also use your own custom metrics. Then there is also a very nice blog series by Carlos Rogan. And this one is now dealing with security. So in contrast to the cloud application programming blogs, it's Kyma for Dummies, Dummies with a Y because Kyma has a Y. And there is part 2 and part 3 is dealing with basic handling of authentication within Kyma, making use of DAGs as the IAP and the API rules in order to secure your endpoints that are publicly available. So very, very nice write-up. However, the code is just dropped into the blog post, so it's not available on GitHub, but that's something that I think we can also deal with ourselves and make that available. Yeah, that was it from the Kyma side of the house, so quite some stuff to do about holidays, right? To try out. And then there is one very, from my perspective, funny announcement by Marcel Hermans, who is the I don't know his exact job title, chief architect when it comes to the RESTful ABAP programming model, the RAP. And well, right after TechEd, the week after TechEd, he's tweeting or responding to other tweets that, well, first of all, there was great feedback to sessions on SAP TechEd, and I also heard that. I did not attend, but I also heard that. And now he says that next year the updates about RAP will be unbelievable. So I think, or I hope, that 2021, from a perspective of really news of having some wow effects, will be higher, more better than at this year's TechEd. So let's see. At least RAP brought out the announcement that 2021 will be the year of RAP. Okay, then one last blog post from the SAP side. It's about building industry solutions in the cloud. This is one central blog post about the industry cloud. I referenced that in the show notes because there is also one link that's, I think, quite interesting for partners who might listen to this or watch this. And that's the link to the architecture and development guide for industry cloud solutions. Because, as I mentioned already several times within this blog post, industry cloud is definitely one playground for partners in the future. Okay, then let's move on to Microsoft and to the serverless area there. There was one blog post that was quite interesting from my perspective with respect to adopting serverless architecture in order to help reduce the CO2 emission. Well, read it yourself. It's a quite interesting read about how serverless can really help you. And what's also interesting, what's at the very end of the blog, there is even a self-paced learning module on sustainable software engineering that's offered by Microsoft. So there is really a learning module that I have never seen before. Maybe I did not stumble across that topic at any other provider up to now. I didn't see something like that on AWS or on SAP with Climate 21 stuff, where they have, let's say, some patterns and guidance on how to do sustainable software engineering. So that's I also referenced that within the show notes. So the principles of sustainable software engineering. It's not really long. It's approximately 33 minutes according to the outline of the learning units. But that's really interesting, I think. So worth to take a look at. Now let's go to the core of the serverless offering of Microsoft Azure, namely Azure Functions. And there is one big announcement now before Christmas, and that is Azure Functions now support custom handlers. So what can you do? That's something that was already available for AWS Lambda for quite some time. You can now develop your Azure Functions also in languages that are not officially supported by Microsoft, because as you might know, Azure Functions support C#, of course, JavaScript, TypeScript, Python, Java. But for example, if you want to implement your functions in Go or R, you had no option. And now that's available as soon as the function can, as soon as the programming language or the ecosystem can spin up an HTTP server. You can kind of link that into the Azure Function runtime and configure it, and then make use of the Azure Function mechanics within that. So that's the overview block that I referenced here by Anthony Shu, who is one of the product managers of Azure Functions, which gives a basic overview and has all the references to the documents in there. I also referenced here a second blog post that was published on a Cloud Guru that dives a bit into how to build a serverless app with also some more examples, a bit more code, and already, well, not sophisticated, but a structure of your function with Go that it goes beyond the sandbox examples of Microsoft. So that's, I think, really cool. So no excuse any longer to not use Azure Functions. Then there is another blog post that I want to highlight, and that's also about Azure Functions and the Kafka trigger that you can use within Azure Functions. And this is some quite extensive blog post about if you're using this trigger, what can you do with respect to performance, what are the concepts behind the Kafka trigger and how to deal with the loads within Kafka and the overall architecture. It's also available as a video that's linked within the blog, so you can either watch it, it's a 12-minute video, or read the blog if you are doing stuff with Azure Functions and the Kafka trigger. Then another blog about bringing together some bits and pieces from Microsoft, namely Azure Functions, the Microsoft Face API, and having some small React app in front that uses Spotify API in order to authorize your access. So quite nice. This is a multi-part blog post. So this first part now focuses on Azure Functions and the Microsoft Face API, how they play together, and is, I think, quite interesting read on how you can leverage additional value by combining all these little services. Then one last news from the serverless part of the house of Microsoft Azure. As I have already announced, the logic apps have here a new runtime that you can also execute locally. And another nice Christmas present from Microsoft. There are some enhancements of this logic app runtime. For example, you can now put breakpoints into your logic app when you execute them locally. And that, I think, really helps when you need to debug that, because if you have a bug in there, yeah, the logging is really good for logic functions, for logic apps. But yeah, it's quite tedious to find out only afterwards what went wrong. There's also a new layouting engine for the logic app designer and so on and so forth. So quite some announcements. Read them if you're doing logic apps, because they come in handy and help you. Then a little bit about, let's say, DevOps thingies that came from Microsoft in the last week. So one thing was a blog post by Mark Rusinovich, who is the CTO of Microsoft Azure, and he wrote a blog post quite some time ago about reliability. And now he kind of dig deeper into the topic by focusing on chaos engineering and fault injection on a general level, let's say it that way, giving you some overview, giving you his point of view, and then also diving into how Microsoft is dealing with all the topics, and also what might come out if you do it not the super right way, because there can become consequences when you do chaos engineering and you do fault injection in production, as one might think. There are also some further blogs about DevOps at Microsoft. One is by Abel Wang, one of the gurus about DevOps at Microsoft. This blog post is more or less a collection of several references, of some videos about DevOps at Microsoft, including how they use Git, what branching strategy they do, and for example, how they include security, how they do site reliability engineering, and so on. So it's a cool entry point, nice collection of links and references. Then diving more into the area of GitHub. GitHub also has some news. I mean, last week there was the GitHub Universe, the big conference about GitHub, and there have been some announcements around GitHub Universe, and one was manual approvers for GitHub Actions, and they are there now. So this blog post dives into how to do manual approvals within GitHub Actions. There was another announcement that was blocked on the GitHub blog page, and that's also about GitHub Actions. Besides the manual approval, you also have environment protection rules. So environment protection rules, and environment secrets. That's kind of three things that go together within GitHub Actions. So you have your CI flow, and now you can define kind of gated areas with specific rules on how you want to deploy there. For example, if you want to deploy to a consolidation system or a test system, this would be one environment that can be protected. So for example, only after manual approval, you can deploy to automatically deploy via GitHub Action to that area. And when you deploy, you also have very specific secrets that are bound to that environment, and that get pulled in to your deployment during the GitHub Action execution. So also, I think really cool announcements during GitHub. I will also say some words later on when we talk about education that came out at the end of the year. Now let's go to the world in between SAP and Microsoft. There are some announcements, one blog post. One blog post is about the integration of SAP ERP data into the common data model. The common data model is kind of the let's say, lingua franca of Microsoft. That's also based on the Open Data Initiative. For those of you who don't remember, Open Data Initiative was an initiative between Microsoft, Adobe, and SAP, where they wanted to bring together their let's say, baseline in order to make the integration between the solution less cumbersome, more seamless experience with common semantics and so on and so forth. Now SAP, I don't know, is not really doing something in that area. I heard some announcement from Adobe and Microsoft. And now this blog post shows you how you can transform your SAP data via the ODP framework that is used within the BI and data intelligence area towards the CDM data model, and how to import the CDM data model then into the Microsoft area in order to make it accessible from, let's say, Power BI, for example, or Azure Synapse with their business warehouse solution, or Databricks, or whatsoever data solution you use. CDM is also the basis for Power Apps, for example. So you can also use it there. Quite an extensive blog post, quite a decent description how to do that. Would be great if SAP would move on in that area too, and don't let the hard work at our side. Then there was one announcement about SAP and Microsoft partnering on the supply chain area. That already came out during SAP TechEd, so maybe you heard it. Maybe there was I think some reference within the keynotes. It's basically about bringing the SAP supply chain solutions and the Industry 4.0 solutions to run on Microsoft Azure. So using Microsoft Azure as an infrastructure as a service, but also to use the IoT capabilities and the edge capabilities, which are, I think, essential for Industry 4.0 into the game and bring them together. So maybe this is one announcement that will push forward the, let's say, collaboration between SAP and Microsoft, formerly known as SAP Embrace, further. I think that's also referenced within the blog post. Yeah, there is within the blog post, or within the announcement of the collaboration, there is also reference to the architecture blueprints that is based on SAP Embrace. So I hope that these blueprints will be revived at some point in time. So at least that's a glimpse of hope when I look at the blog post. Then there was another blog post by Dennis Padilla within the SAP community. I already referenced one of his blog posts about the application gateway web application firewall and how to set that up for Fiori apps. And now this is kind of, let's say, a second part, and that's on how to do the single sign-on configuration using SAML and Azure Active Directory. Again, it's a really extensive blog post with a lot of information, with a lot of guidance how to do that. If you are in that area, I think that really comes in handy and is really helpful. Now let's switch to the last two blocks about education. So there is one thing about education that I want to stress. The GitHub Universe sessions are all available on YouTube to watch. They are split as the conference, so you have different streams like developer experience, like open source communities, like enterprise DevOps. So they have kind of collected them into these streams as the conference was. So they're all there, watch them. If you do not have too much time, but you want to get some idea what happened at GitHub Universe, watch the keynote. It's only 15 minutes. Now you might say, ooh, 15 minutes, that's not too long. I promise you, you will not be disappointed when you watch this 15 minutes. Then there is one further thing from Azure Friday that I want to highlight that you might be interested in, and that's the announcement of Azure PureView, which enables a unified data governance as written here within the title. So this is a really cool service in order to drag together data from different areas into let's say one data lake, but also to bring in semantics, to interpret the data, to label the data, to make it searchable. And it's not a closed story just about data sources within Microsoft, but you have connectors to SAP HANA, to SAP S4HANA, to ECC, and you even have a connector, at least at the moment, that will be there will come more, to S3 buckets at AWS. So that's if you're dealing with data analytics, if you're around that area, I think this video is worth watching. And now one last thing before I finish this session concerning the productivity area, developer productivity or general productivity. As you might have seen, finally this year, breakout rooms are now available within Microsoft Teams. I referenced the announcement blog post in the show notes. This blog post also describes some features and some how-tos concerning how to deal with the breakout rooms. What can you do with the breakout rooms? I would recommend to take a look at that also at the FAQ section at the end of the document. Because if you're coming, for example, from Zoom, it's not the same experience yet. So it's kind of the first iteration of the breakout rooms. They are already quite useful from my perspective, but it's not feature paired to the offerings that are out there for quite some time. So take a look at the, let's say, restrictions and the limitations. But a great step, great thing coming out before Christmas. And yeah, that's it for today. I hope I had some news for you in my bucket from the area of SAP, from the area of Microsoft. As I said at the beginning, this was the last session for this year, so we will see each other hopefully next year with some news from that area. And with that, I wish you a happy Christmas, have some nice holidays, have some nice vacation break, recharge, have a happy new year, and we will see us next year. Until then,